Hey everybody. Before I get started on today's video, I wanted to answer a question somebody had in the comments. I've actually had this asked of me a lot when I've been sculpting, and the question is, how do I store my figure when I'm not working on it? Well, if I'm using green stuff or Procreate for the whole figure, you know, something that's self-curing, I just leave it out when I'm not messing with it. You know, put it up just out of the way, but don't bother covering it up. But when I'm using FIMO, like I am here, I put it in a jar. I just got a little pickle jar here. Anything this size would do. Get some sticky tack. I like the yellow stuff. The white stuff tends to dry out. This stuff stays nice and sticky and malleable even if you put it under a heat lamp or something. Anyways, you just stick it on there in the center and press your figure down nice and hard. Oh, and there you go. When you're done with it, with your figure, you just turn the cap on, and this is a great way to carry your figure. Keeps it nice and secure. It won't come loose. Every now and then I have had one fall off, but it's usually only after the first time I stick it on. Like I didn't push it on far enough, but keeps dust off, keeps you from accidentally bumping it with your hand, anything like that. And yeah, you just pop it off. And I actually prefer sculpting this way because my hand doesn't cramp as much. Sometimes when I'm working with just a small stand, you know, it's a small area to grab, but this one you kind of hold it with your whole hand and feel nice and stable and work on the figure. All right, now let's get to today's video.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this video series on sculpting miniatures. We are now to the point in our miniature sculpting where we need to start bulking out the form. You know, before we were basically working on the skeleton, this is where we're going to get the basic form and underlying musculature. So there's kind of two ways to go about this. One way that a lot of people like to do is to more slowly build up the form by adding individual muscle groups and trying to get a really tight, well-sculpted anatomy. And from there, you would go on to adding details like clothing and armor, things like that. That is a really good way to make sure that you've got everything really in its right place. You know, all the proportions are exactly right and everything. But it can slow you down because you end up spending a lot of time finessing very small details that will most likely be covered up depending on the kind of costuming and whatnot you have on your figure. So I tend to try. I like to do a fast bulking. It's very easy for me, I have to admit, to get sucked into wanting to do very nice, tight anatomical form. But I can tell you from experience that the best way to go about it is to start getting as much putty on there as possible and getting the form on there. You can always trim it away if you need to, and you know, or add on if there's not enough. But you know, if you put on a small dab here and a small dab there and painstakingly work it in, then that can really make the process take a long time. Probably should have pointed this out earlier. When I first start bulking out, though, especially on the legs or the limbs, you know, arms and legs, I like to put probably a smaller amount of putty than maybe I was just talking about, because sometimes when you put on a big blob, it can be a little tough to get it to stick on there, especially if your original FIMO layer was a little thin. So sometimes it can be helpful to start with a small amount, but with that in mind, you know, you don't have to get everything super smooth and super crisp. You're just trying to get the form started so you can see how it'll turn out. Also, make sure that you're trying to work the whole form. A lot of people who have taken drawing classes and whatnot, you know, you're taught to draw the entire figure. Don't stick in one place and work out like all the details of the face only to find out that the head's in the completely wrong position. This is exactly the same. You want to, you know, add a blob of putty there, just get it roughly into shape, throw another somewhere else, and then kind of slowly work it all into place, and only start tightening up when you have most of the form figured out all together. Oh, their figure started to fall off the base a little bit, like I mentioned earlier in the video. That might happen, so you just press it down again if that happens. You might notice that there is no putty or clay on the arms yet. That's kind of optional. With this sort of figure, considering that the pose is open, there's nothing crossing over or covering up details or anything like that, I would usually have skinned this figure, added the the clay layer afterwards, and then worked in to bulk up the arms along with the rest of the body. But the arms are an area that you can kind of get away with out bulking if you want to leave it to kind of do in stages. But typically, if you can, do it all at once. But in this case, I have a weapon that I need to create still and stick on the figure, and I kind of like to do that all at once. Stick it on, add the clay and whatnot. So that's why that's missing here. So I'm just adding a little more here and there. This is a female figure, which is part of the reason why there are certain times that I'm putting a little more putty on, but I'm being a little more careful with it. And that's just because I'm not as, this doesn't come as naturally to me. I grew up on superheroes and, male superheroes, and that's what I wanted to draw and emulate. And so I have to think a lot harder when I'm working on a female form. And since this figure is going to, be more slender, and sometimes I have to remind myself to just throw the putty on, throw the clay on, and then pull some off if there is too much. Another good trick you might see me just do, and I've done it a lot earlier here, is to actually take your figure to help smooth the putty down. I usually do that in larger areas. You can use water or grease from your nose, or you can even lick your finger, just something to give it a little bit of a wet or smoothness to it. And that's a great way to not get too focused on making stuff look really sharp and crisp like you would if you had to go in with a tool. You can just very quickly kind of smooth stuff out just to keep it from looking too rough as you're building up the form. And here you can see I'm starting to get a little more aggressive with adding the putty. This character has got pants and they're fairly baggy at the bottom. I think I end up still maintaining the feminine form as far as in the hips and thighs. For now, I wasn't quite ready to commit to making the pants too baggy yet. But like I said, I had kind of made these calf muscles and they looked really nice and everything, but you're not going to see any of that, so there's no point. You just need to get the clay on, so you can see how everything, the size of everything is going to work together. You know, the legs with the hips with the shoulders, head. Frankly, I haven't put any on the head yet, and I probably should have added some of that earlier, because it's very easy to start designing or bulking the body to the wrong form, because you see this small head and you think, oh well, you know, everything else needs to be small because that part's small. So don't forget to do that. I haven't talked a lot about anatomy in this video because that's something that's a lot harder to teach, because it just takes a lot of practice. You have to study muscles and understand how they work, but there are some good tips and tricks, and I plan on covering that in future videos. You know, taking an arm and showing you kind of how I would lay the clay down. You know, there's several ways in which you could do that, where you just lay a big blob of clay and slowly shape it into form, or you can actually lay smaller pieces of clay in order to kind of preset it in the way the muscle would look. Both ways are really good. Some of it comes to how you want your figure to look, but in the end, at least for this part where we're at right now, you just want to make sure you're bulking it. So while anatomy is a factor and totally matters, it's also, I think it's more important at this stage to just be worrying about the general shape of things and making sure that things look in proportion with each other. Alright, well, we're nearing the end of this video. I hope you had a good time watching it and learned something about kind of the next stage of sculpting miniatures. I hope you'll check out the next video in 2 weeks, and feel free to leave a comment, like the video. Feel free to give suggestions. I have a pretty big list of stuff I plan on covering, and I'm trying to keep it in a sensical progression, I guess, of what you want to know, but I'm always happy to hear what people actually would like to learn about. See you in a couple weeks.